In 1919, a man took 2 weeks off from his job at an insurance company. He went to a small inn in the countryside, alone, and there, in that quiet room, he wrote a letter to his father. The letter was 100 pages long. When he finished, he gave it to his mother to deliver. She read it, thought about it, and decided not to. The letter sat in a drawer for decades. The man who wrote it died 5 years later, at 40, having never married, never had children, never escaped the shadow that had been following him since childhood. His name was Franz Kafka. The first line of that letter: "You asked me recently why I maintain that I am afraid of you. As usual, I was unable to think of any answer to your question, partly for the very reason that I am afraid of you." This is a strange sentence. Most people, when asked why they fear something, can produce a reason. Spiders are venomous. Heights mean falling. Public speaking means judgment. But Kafka couldn't answer. The fear itself was the obstacle to understanding the fear. He was so deep inside it that he couldn't see its edges. And here is what makes this stranger still. Kafka was not a child when he wrote this letter. He was 36 years old. He had a law degree. He had published stories that were beginning to attract attention. By any external measure, he was a functioning adult. But he didn't feel like one. He felt like a boy who had somehow grown old without ever growing up. Kafka is famous now. The trial, the castle, the metamorphosis. We have a word for the feeling his books create: Kafkaesque. Trapped in systems that make no sense. Accused of crimes you don't understand. Waking up one morning to discover you've become something monstrous. But before he was a literary figure, Kafka was a man who couldn't live. He worked as an insurance clerk for most of his adult life, a job he found suffocating but couldn't leave. He lived with his parents until he was 31. He was engaged twice to the same woman, Felice Bauer, and broke off both engagements. He fell in love with other women and couldn't commit to them either. He wanted to marry. He wanted children. He wanted a normal life. Something always stopped him. In his diaries, he wrote about feeling like a ghost, about watching life happen to other people while he stayed outside of it, about the sense that he wasn't really present in his own existence. What was stopping him? In the letter to his father, Kafka tried to explain. His father, Hermann, was a self-made businessman, physically imposing, loud, domineering, certain of his own rightness in all things. He had risen from poverty through sheer will and force, and he expected his children to be grateful for the comfortable life he'd provided. But gratitude was not what Kafka felt. What he felt was fear. A fear so deep it shaped everything: his relationships, his work, his sense of who he was. "My appreciation of myself was much more dependent on you than on anything else," Kafka wrote. "Success merely strengthened me for a moment, nothing more. Your weight, pulling me down the other way, was always much stronger." No matter what Kafka achieved, he felt it wasn't enough. No matter how well he did, he expected failure. His father's voice was inside his head, critical, dismissive, impossible to please. And that voice had become his own. He had internalized the criticism so completely that he no longer needed his father to undermine him. He could do it himself. "I was convinced I would never get through the first year at school," he wrote. "But I succeeded. I was even awarded a prize. But I would certainly never pass the entrance exam. Yet again I succeeded. But then I would certainly fail my first year. But no, I did not fail. I kept on succeeding. But this did not give me confidence. On the contrary, I became convinced that the more I succeeded, the worse the final outcome would be." Kafka blamed his failure to live on his father's shadow. His inability to cut loose from his parents, to marry, to establish himself as an independent adult. But something else was happening too. Something that goes beyond the dynamics of one family. Kafka never separated. He never completed the psychological passage from childhood to adulthood. He remained, in some way, a boy, waiting for permission that would never come, afraid of a judgment that had already been delivered, trapped in a relationship he couldn't resolve. This pattern is not unique to Kafka. It appears across cultures, across centuries, in forms so consistent they suggest something fundamental about human psychology. There's an old myth about what happens when a boy refuses to leave the protection of the mother. Different peoples tell different versions. One goes like this: A child is left alone in the house. His mother has gone somewhere. He cries and cries for her, but no one comes. Then a strange woman appears. She's not human. She's something else, something that looks like comfort but isn't. "Don't you know me?" she asks. "I am like your mother. Don't cry." She bends down to the child. "Put your arm inside me," she says, "inside my body. You'll be safe there." The child refuses at first, but the woman begs and pleads. She promises warmth, protection, an end to the crying. And finally, the child gives in. He slides his arm inside her, all the way up to the shoulder. And then she clamps down. The child tries to pull away, but he can't. His arm is trapped. The woman begins to run, through the forest, through swamps, through thorns and mud. The child is dragged behind her, cut by branches, covered in blood and insects, unable to free himself. Days pass. Finally, the woman stops at a grove of fruit trees. She eats and eats, filling herself. And then she defecates. Out comes the fruit. And out comes the child's arm. But it's shriveled now. Tiny, atrophied, too small to ever use again. With a withered arm, the boy can no longer hunt. He can no longer fish or fight or build. He can't do the things that would make him a man. He's been castrated, in a sense. Not literally, but functionally. The part of him that could act in the world has been destroyed. The meaning of this story is not subtle. The strange woman is not the mother. She's something that looks like the mother. Something that offers the comfort of the mother. But isn't her. She's the desire to return. The pull backward. The seduction of remaining dependent. And the arm, the limb that reaches out and grasps and acts, is exactly what atrophies when that desire is indulged. The child who puts his arm inside her is not being protected. He's being consumed. What looks like safety is actually digestion. What feels like love is actually dissolution. This is what happens to those who refuse the necessary separation. They don't die, but something in them dies. The capacity to engage with life, to reach out, to become an adult. The patterns of dependency take many forms today. Sometimes it's literal. The adult who still lives with parents, still depends on them financially, still expects them to solve problems and make decisions. Sometimes it's emotional. The person who is left home physically but carries the parental voice inside, still seeking approval, still terrified of disappointment, still measuring themselves against an impossible standard. Sometimes the dependency transfers. The person leaves the parents but finds a partner who plays the same role. Someone who takes care of them, makes the decisions, provides the structure they can't provide for themselves. They marry their mother, psychologically speaking, or their father. They recreate the dynamic they were supposed to outgrow. And sometimes the dependency becomes diffuse, attaching itself to anything that offers the comfort of not having to be fully present. Substances, screens, fantasies, compulsions, anything that numbs, anything that distracts, anything that allows you to avoid the terrifying responsibility of existing as yourself. The Jungian analyst Marie-Louise von Franz described a particular pattern she saw repeatedly. Men who could never commit to one woman. Don Juan types who moved from relationship to relationship, always seeking something, never finding it. What these men were seeking, she said, was not actually a woman. It was the mother, the perfect, all-giving mother who exists only in the infant's imagination. They projected this image onto every new partner, believed briefly that they had found her, and then discovered the inevitable truth, that she was only human, flawed, limited, incapable of providing the total care that only a mother can give to a child. And so they left, and found another, and projected again, and were disappointed again. The pattern repeated endlessly, because what they were looking for doesn't exist, not in the adult world. Not in any real relationship between equals. This is one face of the man who is never separated. Not the helpless dependent, but the restless seeker. Still looking for the warmth of the original home. Still believing it can be found outside himself. Still unable to accept that he's alone now and must take care of himself. In most traditional societies, This transition from childhood to adulthood was not left to chance. There were rituals, ceremonies, rites of passage that marked the boundary between one stage of life and the next. These rituals varied in their specifics. Some involved physical pain, some involved isolation, some involved instruction from elders. But they shared a common structure. The child was taken from the world of the mother, often literally removed from the home, from the village, from everything familiar. They were placed in a situation of difficulty or danger or disorientation. They were forced to confront something: fear, pain, solitude, the unknown. And then, if they survived, they were welcomed back, but not as children, as adults, with a new name, sometimes, new responsibilities, new expectations. The community recognized publicly that something had changed. The boy had died. A man had been born. These rituals served a psychological function that went beyond ceremony. They forced the emergence of a stronger ego, one capable of tolerating anxiety, delaying gratification, acting with intention rather than impulse. They created a clear line between before and after. They made the transition visible. The psychologist James Hollis put it this way: these rites involved not only the transition from childhood dependency to adult self-sufficiency, but also the transmission of values, the quality and character of citizenship, the attitudes and beliefs that connect a person to their gods, their society, and themselves. What's striking is that these rituals were especially elaborate for boys. This is not an accident. In most traditional cultures, there was an understanding, intuitive but deep, that masculinity is not automatic. Femininity, in some sense, unfolds naturally. A girl becomes a woman through biological processes that are visible and undeniable. Her body announces the transition. But a boy does not automatically become a man. His body changes, yes, but the inner transformation is not guaranteed. Something additional is required. Something must happen to pull him out of the maternal field and into a different kind of existence. Without that intervention, he might grow old without ever growing up. He might have a man's body and a boy's psychology. He might go through life waiting for someone to take care of him, to tell him what to do, to make the hard decisions on his behalf. This is why the elders of traditional cultures took such care with their young men. They understood the danger. They had seen what happens when boys are not properly initiated. The aimlessness, the rage, the inability to commit, the perpetual adolescence that benefits no one. We no longer have these rituals. They have faded, disappeared, been forgotten. What remains are pale substitutes, graduation ceremonies, legal drinking ages, first jobs, first sexual experiences. None of these require a symbolic death. None of them confront the young person with their deepest fears. None of them announce clearly, you are now responsible for your own life. The modern world offers diplomas instead of ordeals, professional status instead of earned wisdom, sexual conquest instead of genuine maturation. None of these demand anything of the soul. You can accumulate them all and still be exactly as dependent, as passive, as childlike as you were before. And so we have a strange phenomenon: grown men who have never become men. Not because they're weak or stupid or bad, because nothing ever forced them to transform. They were never taken from the world of safety. They were never placed in front of something they couldn't handle. They were never told, in a way that mattered, that the time for being a child was over. Some find substitutes on their own. The military, extreme sports, dangerous jobs, physical challenges that push them to their limits. These can serve the same function as the ancient rites, if they're approached with the right intention. But most people drift through without ever encountering such a test. The result is what Carl Jung called provisional life, a way of existing as if everything were temporary, reversible, not yet real, commitments made with reservations, responsibilities carried with resentment. Always a sense that the actual life is still waiting somewhere ahead, that this is just practice, that eventually something will happen to make it all make sense, but that something never comes. Because it can't come from outside, it has to come from within, and the inner transformation that would make it possible has never occurred. Hollis put it bluntly: What most causes modern man to suffer is the wounding without the transformation. He suffers the stings to the soul without the divine vision. He is asked to be a man when no one is able to define what that means, except in very trivial ways. He is asked to move from childhood to adulthood without rites of passage, without wise old men to receive and instruct him, and without any positive idea of what masculinity even is. There's an old image for this transformation. It appears in myths and fairy tales from cultures around the world. The dragon. The dragon guards something. A treasure, a princess, a kingdom. It lives in a cave or a mountain or a dark forest. It's terrifying. It breathes fire. It destroys those who challenge it. And the hero's task is to fight it. But here's what's strange about the dragon. In many versions of this story, the dragon is not simply an external enemy. It's connected to the hero in some way. It's guarding something that belongs to the hero. Sometimes it's even described as having raised the hero, protected the hero, been the hero's caretaker in some earlier stage of life. The dragon, in other words, is the power that once nurtured you, the force that kept you safe when you were small, the thing you must now confront precisely because it protected you. Because staying under its protection means never becoming what you could become. This is what makes the fight so difficult. The hero is not attacking a stranger. The hero is confronting the very thing that gave them life. There is guilt in this. There is terror. There is the fear that by winning, you will lose something essential. But the treasure cannot be reached any other way. You have to go through the dragon. There's no path around it. The Greek myth of Prometheus offers another image for this struggle. Prometheus stole fire from the gods and gave it to humanity. This fire was not just literal fire. It was consciousness, intelligence, the capacity to know and to choose. It was what separated humans from animals, what allowed them to build civilizations instead of merely surviving. For this gift, Prometheus was punished. He was chained to a rock, and every day an eagle came to devour his liver. Every night, the liver regenerated. Every morning, the eagle returned. The torment was endless. This is a powerful image for what consciousness costs. To be awake is painful. To be responsible is painful. To see clearly, to choose deliberately, to sustain your own existence through will rather than instinct. This is not comfortable. It would be easier to remain asleep, to let someone else make the decisions, to stay in the warm dark where nothing is demanded of you. The eagle comes every day. The price of consciousness is paid every day. There is no final victory after which you can relax and stop struggling. The struggle is continuous. The liver regenerates so the suffering can continue. This is what it means to be a man, in the psychological sense. Not a single achievement, but an ongoing effort. Not a prize you win once, but a practice you maintain. The capacity to tolerate the eagle, to endure the daily cost of being awake. What the dragon guards is the adult self. The capacity to act independently, to make decisions and live with their consequences, to tolerate uncertainty without collapsing into dependence, to be the author of your own existence rather than a character in someone else's story. This treasure is not given, it is won, and it is won through confrontation with the very forces that once protected you. The boy who never fights the dragon remains a boy. He may grow old, he may accumulate years and experiences, but something in him stays frozen at the threshold he never crossed. He waits, he hopes, he resents, he dreams of the life he could have lived if only something had been different. But nothing will be different, not until he picks up the sword. Let me be clear about something. This is not about blame. It's not about hating your parents, or cutting them off, or deciding that they ruined your life. That kind of reaction is itself a form of remaining trapped, defining yourself in opposition to them rather than finding your own center. The point is not that your parents were bad. They might have been good. They might have loved you deeply and wanted the best for you. The problem is not their intentions. The problem is the natural gravitational pull of safety and comfort and dependence, forces that operate in every family, regardless of how healthy or dysfunctional it is. The child naturally wants to stay protected. The parent naturally wants to protect. Neither of these desires is wrong. But if they're not interrupted by something, by a ritual, by a crisis, by a conscious choice, they can continue indefinitely long past the point where they serve any useful purpose. The person afraid of life is not necessarily a victim of bad parenting. They may simply be someone who was never forced to leave. Someone who found the warmth so comfortable that they didn't notice when it became a prison. Someone who never realized that the thing protecting them was also the thing preventing them. Kafka understood this. In his letter, he doesn't simply blame his father. He recognizes that the dynamic between them was complex, that his father's dominance and his own submission created each other, fed each other, became inseparable. I had lost the capacity to speak, Kafka wrote. I lost the capacity to act. I lost the capacity even to think clearly in your presence. Your self-confidence was so great that you had no need to be consistent at all, and yet you never ceased to be right. Notice what Kafka is describing. It's not just fear of his father. It's fear that has become a structure of the self, a way of being in the world, a habit so deep that it continues even when the original cause is absent. His father didn't need to be in the room for Kafka to feel crushed by him. The crushing had been internalized. It had become Kafka's own voice, Kafka's own judgment, Kafka's own way of seeing himself. This is what happens when the separation doesn't occur. The parental voice doesn't go away. It moves inside, and from inside, it continues to speak, continues to judge, continues to say, "You are not ready. You are not enough. You cannot do this alone." Kafka wrote the letter, but never sent it. His mother took it, read it, and decided not to give it to Herman. Maybe she thought it would cause too much pain. Maybe she was protecting her husband. Maybe she was protecting Franz from Herman's response. Whatever her reasons, the letter stayed undelivered. The confrontation never happened. The words that Kafka had finally found the courage to write never reached their target, and Kafka continued to live the same way he had always lived, working a job he hated, living with his parents, failing at relationships, writing at night in a state of exhausted desperation, producing the works that would make him famous. He died of tuberculosis in 1924 at a sanatorium in Austria. He was 40 years old. He had never married. He had never had children. He had never escaped. In his will, he asked his friend Max Brod to burn all his unpublished manuscripts. Brod refused. He published them instead. But Kafka never knew this. He died believing himself a failure, a man who had never managed to live. What would it take to break free? The ancient rituals knew something we've forgotten. They knew that the passage cannot be gentle, that there must be difficulty involved, something that forces the emergence of a self that didn't exist before. The ego does not strengthen through comfort. It strengthens through confrontation, through being pushed against something and discovering that it can push back, through failing and surviving the failure, through facing fear and discovering that fear is not the same as death. This is why the rites of passage involved ordeals. Not because the elders were sadistic, because they understood that safety is not enough to produce maturity, that a person who has never been tested doesn't know what they're capable of, that the capacity to tolerate suffering is not a burden, but a resource, maybe the most important resource for navigating an uncertain world. Today, we have to create our own rites of passage. There are no elders waiting to guide us, no community to witness our transformation, no clear boundary between before and after. The culture offers us only vague markers, turning 18, graduating, getting a job, that require nothing internal and confer nothing lasting. This means the work is harder. It means we have to choose our own ordeals, face our own dragons, cross our own thresholds. No one is going to do it for us. But it also means the work is possible, because the psyche still responds to the same patterns. The dragon still guards the treasure. The arm can still be reclaimed if we pull it out in time. What does it look like, practically? It looks like doing the thing you're afraid of, not the dramatic thing necessarily, not skydiving or moving to a foreign country, though sometimes it might be that. It looks like the ordinary things that feel impossible, having the conversation you've been avoiding, making the decision you've been deferring, accepting the responsibility you've been trying to hand off to someone else. It looks like tolerating discomfort instead of fleeing from it, sitting with uncertainty instead of demanding reassurance, allowing yourself to fail and not collapsing into self-hatred. Kafka's letter was found after his death, along with his novels, his diaries, his unfinished stories. His friend Max Brod was supposed to burn everything. He didn't. And so we have it. 100 pages of a man trying to explain to his father why he was afraid of him, why he couldn't live. Hermann Kafka died in 1931, 7 years after his son. We don't know if he ever heard about the letter. We don't know what he would have said if he'd read it. Here is what we do know. Franz Kafka wrote the truth. He named the pattern. He understood, with painful clarity, exactly what had happened to him and why. And it didn't save him. Understanding the cage is not the same as leaving it. Seeing the dragon is not the same as fighting it. Kafka could describe his prison better than almost anyone who has ever lived. But description was all he had. He couldn't walk through the door. The arm in the myth is shriveled because it was kept inside too long. It was meant to reach out, to grasp, to act in the world. But it stayed hidden, protected, warm, and in that warmth, it atrophied. There is probably a moment in the story when the child could still have pulled free, before the arm had shrunk too much, before the damage was permanent. But the myth doesn't tell us when that moment was, or how the child could have recognized it. Maybe there isn't a clear moment. Maybe it's a gradual thing, a slow withdrawal of options, a narrowing that happens so slowly you don't notice until it's almost complete. Or maybe it's never too late. Maybe the arm can always regenerate if you're willing to go through the pain of using it again. The myth doesn't say. Kafka remained in the provisional state until the end. He was 40 when he died. He had never married. He had never had children. He had never stopped being afraid. But he wrote. He produced some of the most haunting literature of the 20th century. Stories about people who wake up transformed into insects, who are arrested for crimes no one will name, who try to reach castles that keep receding into the distance. These stories are not triumphant. They don't end with the hero slaying the dragon. They end with confusion, with ambiguity, with the sense that something essential has been missed and can never be recovered. Maybe that was the only confrontation Kafka was capable of. Not with his father, with the page. Maybe the writing was his way of pulling the arm out, even if only partially. His way of reaching toward the world, even if the reach was incomplete. We read his books now and recognize something in them. The feeling of being trapped, the sense of not quite belonging to your own life, the fear that has no clear object. We recognize it because we know it. What we do with that recognition is a different question, one that Kafka can't answer for us, one that nobody can.